Okay, one more video, and today we're going to be talking about carbohydrates. That's our first macromolecule. Hydrated carbon is basically what we've got. Oops, went too fast, sorry. Okay, so carbohydrates are in a 1-to-1 ratio of carbon, hydrogens, and oxygen. Okay, when you think about it, water, H2O, is in a 2-to-1 ratio of hydrogens to oxygens, and we are basically hydrating carbon. That's how we get carbohydrates. So we've got a 1 carbon to 2 hydrogens to 1 oxygen ratio. Okay. There are a lot of C to H bonds, so carbon to hydrogen bonds, that are really good at energy storage. And that energy is released during a process called oxidation. Oxidation, when we talk about oxidation and the other process, reduction, oxidation is loss of electrons. Okay, so that's how we get that energy. Reduction is gain. We'll talk more about that in our energy unit. But sugars are the most important of the carbohydrates. So the monosaccharides are single sugars. Those are the simplest of our carbohydrates. Most of them have 6 carbons. Okay, they have the most energy in their 6 carbon bonds. I should have said that, excuse me. And glucose is probably the one that we talk about the most and is the most important. In glucose itself, there are 7 carbon to hydrogen bonds and a carbonyl group orientation. Okay, and from there, to move my little thing here, so it's not in the way, the orientation of that makes 2 different ring forms. Okay, and we're also concerned about this hydroxyl group here. Okay, I'm sorry, I said carbonyl. This is supposed to be hydroxyl group. Makes 2 different ring forms. Correction on that slide. I will make sure to correct that. Okay, so different isomers of sugar. So remember, there can be structural or stereoisomers. So we've got glucose and galactose, and you can see the difference in there, how they're stereo of each other. And then you've got a structural isomer of fructose that has a different structure. So same formula, just different structure to it, different different carbon skeleton. But it's really cool because even though they all have the same formula, our taste buds can actually tell the difference between the 3. And if we were together, we could taste a little glucose and fructose, and you can see that you can actually taste the difference. Okay, then we move on to disaccharides. Disaccharides are put together mainly to transport or store our sugars. Usually because the enzymes can't work on them to break them down. And so they're easy ways to hold on to sugars until we're ready to use them. So a disaccharide, di means 2, is 2 monosaccharides or single sugars that are linked together through that process called dehydration, where we remove a water, remove an H from one group, remove an OH from the other, and by doing that, we remove a water and we're linking these 2 together. So sucrose is a glucose and fructose linked. Lactose is a galactose and glucose. And then maltose is a glucose to glucose link. And we did a problem on lactose intolerance where we were looking at it. And you need that enzyme called lactase, which I don't produce enough of. Maybe some of you don't either, to be able to break down lactose into its 2 forms. Okay, then we get to our polysaccharides. Poly means many. Polysaccharides are long chains of monosaccharides that are all linked together through dehydration, again, removing that water. They're really good for energy storage. And here's one super important difference. Plants use starch for energy storage, which is a particular type of polysaccharide, and animals use glycogen for long-term storage, for long-term energy storage. We'll also use fat, but we're just talking carbohydrates right now. And then structural support, plants use a thing called cellulose, which is another polysaccharide. And arthropods and fungi use a structure called chitin, which is found in the cell walls of the fungus and found in like the skeletons or outer shells of insects and crustaceans. And then here's just some pictures of like the structure of glycogen versus the structure of cellulose. Okay, so a little chart just showing you. So cellulose is made by a plant. It's a beta glucose, and then it just shows you a diagram of it and the general shape. Here's starches, two of those, amylose and amylopectin, and those are also both produced by plants. Okay, and what they look like. And then finally glycogen, which is made by animals, and that's also an alpha glucose, and that's what it would look like. So one of the things that you may hear about in a diet, in your like food diet, is that when you eat plants that are high in fiber, you're actually eating a lot of plants that have a lot of cellulose in them. We cannot digest cellulose. Okay, that's that undigestible material. And so if you're counting carbohydrates like some people do, you get to subtract these carbohydrates, the ones that come from cellulose with the beta glucose, because we can't digest those. So those don't ever affect your blood sugar levels. We have the enzyme to digest alpha glucose because that's the kind we produce, not pick. It's the kind we produce. Okay, and that ends our discussion on carbohydrates. Please ask questions and let me know how you're doing with all of this. Tomorrow we'll move on to lipids.